Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. It's always interesting to go after the keynote speaker, but I think what we have to share from Legrand pairs nicely with what he just covered. So we'll get into it. The keynote spent a lot of time discussing some of the software tools and collaboration tools out there. We're going to talk a little bit about the hardware that can allow you to collaborate. I assume everybody can see my screen at this point. It should be a nice bird's eye view of a desktop, and that's what we're going to talk about, is optimizing your desktop AV system for productivity. So a little bit different than building out a conference room or a classroom or a huddle space or collaboration suite. This is your actual one-to-one desktop. So we'll dive into that. And the reason we're going to that is it doesn't really matter where you are, at the office, in the classroom, at home. At some point you're interfacing with a computer directly. This applies to command and control systems for security guards, first responders, emergency responders, disaster recovery teams, call centers, logistics control stations for transportation, warehousing, shipping, as well as sales and customer service activities. And then just general professionals. If you're doing graphic design, you're involved in finance, sales, marketing, engineering, customer support, any level of data analysis, legal or evidence review. You're going to spend a lot of time staring at a computer screen. And then finally, music and sound editors, podcasting, streaming, e-gaming, and more and more even online learning are done from a workstation. It's really hard to even think about a space or an application or a job where you're not on a computer a good chunk of the time.
So Tristan, we are not seeing your content. If you're presenting some, we just see you with the background.
Should be. Oh, there we go.
Bingo.
Bingo. All right. All right, we good?
Yes, sir.
All right. So title slide, so we're up to speed now. So today what we're going to talk about is the techniques for selecting the right type of display, or right size of display for your desktop. We're going to learn a little bit about the resolution and the relationship it has to viewing distance. As well as screen size. We'll get into the specifications associated with computer monitors to figure out which ones are important, which ones don't necessarily factor in all that much, and how to tell them apart. And then we're going to learn how to interpret the numbers on a spec sheet. And finally, we're going to put all this together with the slant towards ergonomics and connectivity to ensure that your workspace is designed so that you can be the most productive. So what is desktop productivity? It meshes very well with the previous presentation. It's tech and software used for producing any type of information: documents, presentations, worksheets, databases, reports, charts, graphs, digital paintings, electronic music, digital video, you name it. It's the technology that helps you do that. Technology has increased the productivity of the individual worker dramatically since the 80s, when we were using typewriters, paper filing systems, handwritten lists and ledgers. I remember when I first started in outside sales, printing out MapQuest directions, which I guess even MapQuest at the time would have been considered a productivity tool, and then having these printed maps to figure out where my next meeting was. In today's world, in the US, more than 78% of what we call middle school occupations, or middle skill, excuse me, those are people that fall in between a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree in terms of job requirements. More than 78% of those people use some sort of productivity technology in their day-to-day. And this is going to continue to grow. The need for communication and collaboration between remote workers, increased adoption of bring your own device, BYOD, the cloud-based software and service solutions that Phil just talked about in length, enterprise mobility as it grows, and small and medium-sized enterprises is expected to propel this demand even farther forward. So the hardware needs to keep up with the software. If you're still working from an old CRT display or even a small 24-inch WXGA display, there are definite upgrades that can be made to help you be more productive and help you feel better at the end of the day, essentially. So what makes desktop productivity a big deal? Is it a big deal? The global productivity management software market is expected to hit $103 billion by 2027. So it's a massive market. It's continuing to grow as collaboration between remote workers increases, the BYOD increases, cloud-based solution services increases. This market is only going to continue to grow. In fact, between now and 2027, they're expecting about a 13.4 growth in that period, CAGR growth. Within that, AI and predictive analytics is expected to grow at the highest at 14.8% over the forecast period. And the cloud segment follows a little bit behind that. Again, what's really going to drive growth in this as well is small and mid-sized enterprises as they start to adopt more of this productivity software. So the background aside, and again, the keynote covered that in detail, so we can continue to plug forward. How do we assemble the perfect setup for our workspace? And again, this can be your home, it could be your office, it can be in the classroom. Ideally, you want each of those to kind of be similar to each other. So the first thing we do is with any project is a needs analysis. You approach a needs analysis without any expectation, but with a serious intent to examine the factors that impact your productivity on a daily basis. Being able to see content is not necessarily the same as being able to read or digest it easily and without strain. And having the ability to open multiple windows and multitask, work between tasks, use specialized software programs, all of this needs to be factored in when making a decision. So we're going to look at the video elements of productivity. We do have a separate session that covers sound, but we're going to focus on video today. So we can make our needs analysis more valuable by thinking about the applications and tasks that you, the user, or me, the user, are looking to accomplish with the system. What kind of work are you doing the most? What kind of work that you're doing is the most challenging because your image is too small, it's hard to read the images on the screen or the letters on the screen. Your position relative to your display is awkward. You're arching your neck, craning your neck. What technology changes can you use to increase your productivity by making your system easier to use or more enjoyable to use? So the first thing we want to do in this scenario, and really with any evaluation of display size or type, is to document your average viewing distance. So this would be step one, is measure the distance from your own eyes to your display or to the surface of the screen. Ideally, you would do this several times over the course of a workday because your distance might change depending on the type of task you're doing, the amount of ambient light in the room, just fatigue. You might get a little closer or farther from your display. So kind of average that out over the course of the day, depending on the types of tasks you're doing. Understanding the ideal range of distances in the viewer to screen equation will allow you to predict your resolution as well as display size, also how to position your displays, and even some more. As a general rule, if you don't have the opportunity to measure, most people sit between 28 and 38 inches from their display. So the geometry of the display is key to efficiency. If you get the screen right and positioned properly, the rest of it will follow. I think that's a direct quote from In Vogue, but I could be wrong. The top of the display ideally should be no lower than your eye level. Generally, it's going to be a little bit higher. And you should keep in mind when figuring that out that it's going to vary depending on if you're at a sitting desk or a sit-stand desk. A good place to start as a general rule is consider the top of your display to be about 48 inches off the floor. This gives you a little bit of a rise above where your natural seated position would be for most people. You should also factor in that in many instances, there's going to be a webcam involved, and it's going to generally be mounted to the top bezel of the display. As a rule, you want that webcam to be slightly above your eye level. There's really only one good angle, and that's head on just above eye level. If you put it too low, you get an unflattering view for a lot of us that will detract from the quality of your conference. I actually did an interview the other day with a candidate who had their webcam positioned poorly. I saw basically eyes up. It was a challenge to do the interview that way. A lot of us today are working from two monitors. Generally, one of those monitors is a larger desktop monitor, a purpose-built monitor, and the second monitor is the built-in from your laptop. You can take this formula, and it might be tempted just to assume, okay, well, I can upgrade by just adding a second larger display and having two matching displays that fill my space. In some instances, that might not be the way to go. There are some very nice ultra-wide displays that boast a 21.9 or 32:9 aspect ratio. These are oftentimes considered 5K displays. They generally range between 38 to 49 inches. In that larger aspect ratio, your pixel count will be 5120 by 1440. When you do the math on that ultra-wide display, it actually gives you the exact same viewing areas putting two 27-inch QHD displays side by side. Same area, same pixel count, but you don't have a seam. You don't have where those bezels come together. So it's easier to move tasks from one display to another, expand tasks over the full size of both displays. So in a lot of instances, that's advantageous. So just adding a second display might not be the best way to go in a lot of situations. Some of these newer ultra-wide displays even allow you to do control and view multiple sources at the same time. They have the software processing to do that. Also meriting consideration is a monitor mount. A lot of people think this is a nice to have accessory, but it really is crucial to setting up your desktop for productivity. It's going to allow you for full adjustment of your display position in 3 dimensions. It's going to ensure that your image is perpendicular to your angle of view. Even as you move around, you can adjust the display. And this becomes even more important if you're using a sit-stand desk. You definitely need to be able to move that display around to accommodate your positioning as you shift throughout the day. Another side benefit of display mounts is they clear up a lot of real estate on your desk. By getting the display up off the desk, you have a lot more space for any paperwork, any notepads, whatever it be that you might need there. And we'll touch on the display mounts a bit more in a few slides. So diving into the math a little bit, there actually is a standard that was developed by Avixa called the Discus standard to optimize system specifications. Discus stands for Display Image Size for Content in Audio-Visual Systems. I don't know why they use the A for audio if we're talking about displays. I guess Discus probably didn't sound as nice, but that's what it is. And this is 2D content only. If you're dealing with 3D content, there's a whole separate standard that you would go by. So what Discus does is it gives us a way to optimize system design specifications to allow the ideal image height, and through that metric, select the right diagonal measurement and resolution for a system. It doesn't just give you the size of the monitor you need, but it actually helps determine the maximum resolution appropriate based on the task for your space. And then it will recommend the closest and farthest you would want to be from that display, depending on what you're trying to do. If you want more information on Discus, there's a ton available through Avixa that you can go into, and this same standard applies to large venue screens as well, projection screens, video walls, you name it. The standard is really a visual acuity standard. When we're talking about AV systems for Discus, they generally break it down into two categories. There are a few more, but for most use cases, it breaks down into basic decision-making and analytic decision-making. Basic decision-making is essentially what we're doing right now. You're reading a slide, you have to be able to read the text, you should be able to see the charts and graphs and other illustrations and being able to understand them and absorb the information. It's really centered around assimilating, understanding some basic concepts. The next level is analytic decision-making, which is more concerned with pixel level detail. When you get into analytic decision-making capabilities, you essentially want to be looking at your screen like you're looking out a window. You should be able to see everything on your screen that a person with 20/20 vision would be able to see, again, if they were looking at whatever it is in real life. When we get into the analytic decision-making standard, we're really getting to the limits of human vision. So all things being equal, if you can design around this standard, and it's going to ensure that regardless of what task you're doing, if you're switching from reading a spreadsheet to having to edit a photograph, for example, this will ensure that you're covered both ways. Analytic decision-making also is key to engineering. If you need to zoom in on engineering documents, wiring diagrams, it's important for that. And certainly if you're getting into any type of medical imaging. So Avixa has launched this online tool. The link is there at the bottom of my screen. That allows you to plug in some basic information, and it does the math for you. So you don't have to figure out pixel resolution and image height versus distance. It's all factored in. So we have an example of that calculator here. We used, it's actually a combination basic decision-making and analytic decision-making for this format here. So looking in, we're taking a 16-inch tall image we're trying to find the farthest viewer, which equates to a 32-inch diagonal 16:9 screen. When we put that in, it's saying it wants the farthest viewer around 25 inches, 26 inches from the display, which is about where a standard viewer would sit. And that's at 4K content. You'll see as we go down in resolution, in the next circle here, you can actually get a little bit farther back. The higher resolutions, we want to use the full benefit of the resolution. You want to be a little bit closer. As we go down in resolution, a little bit farther back works. If you ever looked at an old direct view LED wall, it's the same concept, just in a much larger scale. You can also use this tool to find the maximum or the minimum image height. So you can plug in your resolution, how far you're going to be. It'll tell you the smallest image you should have. Again, if we go down in resolution, you're 38 inches away. It gets you to that same 32-inch diagonal screen, just at a 1440 resolution, which is pretty standard. And then finally, if you know your vertical, your resolution, you can plug that in, or excuse me, if you know your height and your distance, your image height and your distance, and you want to figure out what resolution display you should look for, you can plug that into the third field here. So it's a nice tool, gives you some guidelines. Just one refresher, everything in this Discus standard is based on image height, not the diagonal. Just when we're thinking of images, what they did is they started looking at letter height. How many rows of letters are going to fit into a screen? What's the minimum height that letter can be in standard Windows formats for it to be legible at the image size? It's really kind of one of the things that was factored in when developing the standard. So math aside, what's the bottom line when selecting a display? If you're using a screen under 27 inches diagonal, then standard high definition is going to be great. Many 24-inch monitors are still out there, still in use. if you're sticking with the 24-inch, or even if you're moving up to a 27-inch, there's probably not a need to go to a full 4K or QHD level resolution. Once you get above that size, or if you are replacing your monitors no matter what, this QHD 1440 by 2650 is a great resolution for 27 to 32-inch monitors, which happen to be the sweet spot for most productivity systems. Oops. Sorry about that. If you work with images quite a bit, you do any type of image editing, video editing, photo editing, if you're a big time gamer and your off time, use the same system for that, then a 4K display is really the way to go. That would be the UHD resolution. It will get you just about every bit of information on a 32-inch screen that you can see from a typical viewing distance. There's really nothing that's going to be missed due to resolution. For most practical applications, there's no need to go above 4K. I know 8K displays are starting to roll out, and some other higher resolutions. When we're talking about desktop computer monitors, your eye won't be able to resolve much above 4K no matter what, even if you're sitting right on top of the display. And then finally, for the ultimate experience, 5K resolution is a great step. And I know I just said don't go above 4K. This is a little bit different because we're going up to 5K by just expanding the width of the display, getting outside of that 16:9 or 16:10 format, and getting into these ultra wide formats, which, as mentioned earlier, can often replicate a pair of 27-inch side-by-side monitors. Some of these even have a little bit of a curve to them, so it keeps the focal length more even to your eyes because the monitor is wider. Great for gaming, great for anything where you're multitasking, opening different windows, moving things around. And as I move forward into the display types, I'll preface it to say I work for Legrand. We don't sell any type of computer displays or TVs or anything like that, not one of our lines. So I'm going to cover some things in broad strokes, but about specific models, specific technologies, our friends at LG or Sony or NEC, who I think presented earlier today or later today, or the experts at Lightworks would be great resources to talk about.
Tristan.
Yes.
We have a question here
Mm-hmm.
about availability on various Legrand brands.
Okay.
It's time for you to answer it.
Okay. Just a general availability question?
General availability, what are your lead times looking like?
It varies quite a bit, not just from line to line, but also from model to model. We did just get a number of containers of chief product in, so a lot of the chief lead time issues that we were experiencing a month or two ago are being alleviated. So that line's getting back to normal. Daylight, for the most part, has been okay. We had a shortage of some springs and motors earlier in the summer, but those are in stock now. The one product that is still a little bit delayed is the Idea Screen, the dry erase boards. Mid-Atlantic has actually been pretty good. We haven't experienced major delays from most of the core product line, the exception being some of the power solutions, because those are manufactured in overseas plants. Audio is right on schedule. Everything's pretty much caught up. There are a few select control units that we're waiting on chips, but cameras, we've been good. Who am I forgetting here? Luxel's been good. C2G, it's been a little hit or miss, but that's mostly because we moved into a new factory and that factory is getting up and running, and COVID kind of put that a little behind schedule. But we oftentimes can substitute something as simple as a different color or giving an upgrade on your cable needs at no cost. So
Thanks for answering that, Tristan.
I just cut the time. Sorry, I'm running a little late here, so we'll breeze through this because, again, I don't sell displays, not my forte anyway. When looking at panel types, there's really three different types. There's a twisted pneumatic, vertical alignment, in-plane switching. You can see kind of synopsis of those there. The twisted pneumatic is going to give you a very quick refresh rate, but very narrow viewing. a relatively inexpensive type of display to make and to purchase. You'll see these a lot of times for gamers because they like the right in front and need the refresh. The vertical alignment method is a good middle of the road. It's going to give you good contrast and color, but the response time is great. And then top of the line would be IPS or in-plane switching, which is going to give you the best response time. And then FreeSync and G-Sync, they're kind of the same thing. They allow the graphics card to control the refresh rate dynamically depending on what's going on the screen to give you the smoothest image. Speaking of refresh rate and response time, for most applications, unless you're getting into gaming or doing anything that has especially fast moving images, you can look at a refresh rate of about 7 milliseconds would be great. You can go down to about 16 milliseconds, which equates to a 60 frame per second. If you get into below 7, you get into like a 5 millisecond rise time. That's where those are great for gamers or anything where there's very fast moving action going on. If you're doing video editing, that work well. Color space. The standards you're looking for are down at the bottom. sRGB is the 1080p standard. That means your display is calibrated for high definition. Rec 709 is essentially the same as that, but this would be the camera encoding standard. So they're identical. Just one is the camera, one's the display. And Rec 2020 would be if you're looking at a 4K display. So if you stick to those standards, you see those on the box, you know that your display is going to be calibrated. And then finally, moving away from the displays, as mentioned, your display mount is going to be critical. You want to make sure that it moves left to right, up, down, forward, back, offers tilt, gets the display out of the way, regardless if it's a single display, dual display, what have you. And then cables and docking stations. We recommend DisplayPort over HDMI when you can use it. Some people would argue that, but there are some reasons. DisplayPort is built for this type of application, whereas HDMI is built to transport video and audio. Docking stations are key if you're moving your device from home to office, home to school, a mix of all three. Being able to plug your computer in, have everything work seamlessly, and keep your computer charged, your laptop charged throughout the day is crucial. Those are both available through C2G. And then finally, sorry for the thing, I got off to a slow start there, but to summarize, productivity involves viewing, creating, and modifying communications. You start with your needs analysis like you would any project, and then optimize for your viewing range. You can use the Discus standard as a reference. You need to determine if you're doing basic analytic basic decision-making or analytic decision-making. That will help dictate the resolution to a bit. And then your mount and connectivity are the last things that factor in to ensure that you have a quality system. And the last slide here, if you want more information, Legrand has a ton of online courses. A number of these courses offer CTS RUs, big CRUs, AIA, as well as CDRUs. In fact, this course that we just completed, anybody who needs CTS renewal units, please let the Lightworks team know. This course is worth half of the CTS RU, so you get something for it.